Hello and welcome to Baltimore Pioneers, discussions with compelling thinkers and doers in Baltimore. I'm Jacqueline Hammond, and thanks for tuning into the student-produced show. Our guest in this episode is Jennifer S. Vey, a senior fellow and co-director of the A&T and Robert M. Bass Center on Innovation and Placemaking at the Brookings Institution. Ms. Vey has a Master's of Planning degree from the University of Virginia and a BA in Geography from Bucknell University. Her focus is on economic development and quality of life in cities and metro areas. She lives in Baltimore with her family, and today we will be talking about innovation districts in Baltimore. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. Thanks for having me.
That's great. You're welcome. So how did you get started working with Brookings?
Sure. Well, as you noted, I have a BA in Geography from Bucknell, and it was during my time as an undergraduate that I just became very interested in the intersections between people and places and how they impact one another. So from there, I decided to get a master's degree in urban planning, and after getting that degree, I went off to work at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for several years. And after that, I started working at Brookings. So I've been there about 16 years.
Nice. So like you said, I know prior to working at Brookings, you worked as a community planning development specialist for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Mm-hmm. And how did your work there help you with your transition to Brookings?
Sure. Well, that was early in my career, so at that time, everything was a big learning opportunity. And so during my time at HUD, I learned an awful lot about federal housing and economic development programs. I started off in the budget office there and learned about the whole federal budget process. And then I went on to work in the Empowerment Zone initiative and oversaw, from the federal standpoint, that program, and that included empowerment zones like the one here in Baltimore, the Baltimore Empowerment Zone. And so it was during that time that I just learned really about federal programs, about the budget process, and certainly by working in the Empowerment Zone program, I learned just about the empowerment zones and a lot of the practices and models that were going on in cities around the country.
Nice. And so I know you and your colleagues for the past several years have been focusing on the emergence of innovation districts in the U.S. and Europe. Mm-hmm. And so what is an innovation district?
Sure. An innovation district is basically a dense enclave or a hub, typically within a city or at least an urban area, that's growing up around major anchor institutions such as a major research university or a major hospital system or even a major firm. And you're seeing the growth of companies, of startup activity, of things like incubators and accelerators growing up around these major anchor institutions. And then you also see, these areas tend to be very walkable, very transit-oriented, have a high degree of amenities. So that's sort of the typical model that we often see of innovation districts, though we do see them in suburban areas too, sort of the remaking of a classic suburban science park, for example. We're seeing that in many areas around the country. And on occasion, they're even growing up in areas that might be underutilized, maybe former industrial areas or along waterfronts, particularly in strong market cities where there's a need for land for development. But the typical model tends to be around these sort of major anchor institutions where you're just seeing this really growth of innovative activity, the growth of innovation ecosystems.
And how did you decide that you wanted to undertake research on these innovation districts?
Sure. Well, this goes back several years, and in part it came from just recognizing that this was happening, both in Europe and in this country, and increasingly actually in other cities around the world. But my colleagues at Brookings and myself started to observe these trends that were happening, and in many ways these were really kind of organic trends. They were, we were seeing patterns, of growth in these urban hubs that were really being driven by a few things. One, market trends. The innovation economy itself had been shifting and changing so that there was a stronger need and desire of companies to want to be near major research institutions, to want to be near other firms. And also the shifting demands of the workforce too, that many workers in these fields wanted to be in kind of more dynamic urban areas. And so, it really started by observing that this was happening on the landscape in cities and recognizing those patterns, just really wanted to investigate, what was happening, why was it happening, where was it happening, and what were really the factors that were going on.
Cool. And does Baltimore have an innovation district?
So, Baltimore has a few areas that seem to be emerging as innovation districts. Actually, right here in this area where Frederick Douglass is an area called Innovation Village, and in many ways it's calling itself sort of the first official innovation district, I think in part because there's an actual infrastructure or governance kind of infrastructure to keep it together. As I noted, many of these innovation districts are sort of emerging somewhat organically around the country, but many of them don't quite yet have a glue that's keeping them together, where you might have a lot of different stakeholders in the area, but there's not necessarily a common vision or a common set of goals that they're all working towards. Innovation Village actually has more of a structure to really help fuel economic growth in this particular geography.
Cool. So we're going to take a quick break from our conversation with Ms. Vey, but when we return, we'll be talking about how communities can get involved in creating innovation districts.
Did you know that students who have a regular diet of nutritious foods are healthier, have more energy, and do better in school? That's why City Schools is increasing its healthy and fresh food options for every meal served during the school day.
I love that they have my favorite vegetables and fruits. By eating healthy, I'm gonna get more smart. If you don't be healthy, you're gonna get sick.
Students who eat well, do well. So be sure to choose healthy options to keep your body energized and your mind focused and ready to learn.
Modernizing school buildings for Baltimore City students has begun, like right here at Arundel Elementary School.
Amazing new spaces to learn in.
Yes, through this program, schools and communities are being brought together in a brand new way.
And I'm so proud to be part of this effort.
That's right. Construction jobs are open and internships are available. Discover more about the program at www.baltimore21stcenturyschools.org.
Building a brighter future together.
These are our future: engineers and electricians,
software designers and doctors,
construction workers and childcare providers.
They will build apps and houses, create menus and video games,
work with cutting-edge technology and kids.
They'll be found in classrooms and courtrooms, construction sites and computer labs.
They are Baltimore City Public School students. They are career and technology education.
A lot of exciting things are happening each and every day in Baltimore City Public Schools. Our students are learning, excelling, growing, and achieving as they prepare for college and careers. You can see our students in action and the work they're producing right here on Education Channel 77 and online. If you'd like to watch more stories on the exciting things our students are doing in Baltimore City Public Schools, please visit www.vimeo.com/cityschools.
Thanks for watching Education Channel 77.
Welcome back to Baltimore Pioneers. I'm Jacqueline Hammond, here with Jennifer S. Vey, co-director of the Ann.T. and Robert M. Bass Center on Innovation and Placemaking at Brookings Institution. So, first question, how can communities get more involved in creating or supporting innovation districts?
Sure. Well, in any of these innovation districts, as they're emerging, they really involved a wide range of actors. So this can be, folks at universities, the leadership at universities, the leadership at hospital centers, the startup community, meaning entrepreneurs, people that are running various types of innovation spaces. So they really involve a wide range of different actors in these areas. And so, for what we're seeing around the country is as these areas are developing and emerging, that more of these actors are starting to recognize the trends and saying, wow, how can we start to be a little bit more strategic about the kind of activities that are happening here and start to really act around more of a common vision and goals to really help the innovation ecosystem in these areas thrive. In many places too, it's actually happening within the hubs themselves with varying degrees of participation by the public sector. But certainly the public sector can be very supportive of these areas as well in a number of different ways, just thinking again strategically themselves about recognizing the growth where it's happening and thinking about their own investments and how they can help support it.
And so what about institutions or businesses who see this happening but aren't really digging in or interested? How can we get them, on board with these districts?
Sure. I mean, I think for anything, it really comes down to people understanding, the benefits to themselves and what the opportunities are. So, I think for the actors within these districts, part of it is recognizing how, if they were, maybe better coordinated with the other stakeholders, what the benefits of that would be in terms of working towards, maybe a more unified idea of what the potential of a place is and working to reach it. I think for people outside these districts, it's recognizing the growth where it's happening, and I think it's important for all the stakeholders to start to better understand how the growth can really benefit the city as a whole and greater numbers of people in the city.
And who are some of the bigger stakeholders here in Baltimore in our own innovation districts or village?
Sure. Well, I think it varies, across the city. If you look at where some of the innovation enclaves, whether or not they're officially innovation districts or not, I think there are several areas where you're seeing a lot of these patterns of innovative growth. It varies from place to place. So, in Innovation Village, for example, the idea is to really build on many of the assets that are here. So that includes assets like Coppin State, for example, and MICA and some of the other universities that are involved. Certainly you've got, proximity to the train station. You've got other assets like transit assets, plus all the other, existing businesses and entrepreneurs that are here. And then you've got some of the drivers of the whole effort, like Richard May, who's a major driving force behind it, who are really working with the community, who are also major actors and stakeholders in these districts. In other places, you're seeing sort of this innovative ecosystem growing up around the University of Maryland at Baltimore, particularly around the biopark, for example, and there are many different actors, in that part of town or over on the other side of the town, a lot of the activity that's happening around the Johns Hopkins Hospital Center. And then you even have an area like Station North, which is a little bit different because it's more of an arts and creative kind of innovation district. So I think for all these districts here or anywhere, you're seeing different sets of actors, and where maybe the districts themselves have a different kind of focus in terms of what their major strengths are and the assets there that they're really trying to build off of.
Cool. And so, are there any new different hubs where we can see where it's kind of building, but it hasn't quite gotten there yet? Any communities like that here around the world?
Sure. I think some of the ones that I named would be where you're seeing a lot of this activity. I think in the future, the whole development around Port Covington will be another place to watch. That's going to be a major new development with and a major new sort of ecosystem in the city. But again, I think it really comes down to what's the continued growth of these places and how are the different actors and the stakeholders in them, how are they thinking about that area and what their own goals are for further growth and development.
Okay, let's take another quick break and come back as we discuss how innovation districts can benefit communities and their residents. Stay tuned.
These are our future: engineers and electricians,
Software designers and doctors.
construction workers and childcare providers.
They will build apps and houses, create menus and video games.
Work with cutting-edge technology and kids.
They'll be found in classrooms and courtrooms, construction sites, and computer labs.
They are Baltimore City Public School students. They are career and technology education.
Modernizing school buildings for Baltimore City students has begun, like right here at Arundel Elementary School.
Amazing new spaces to learn in.
Yes, through this program, schools and communities are being brought together in a brand new way.
And I'm so proud to be part of this effort.
That's right. Construction jobs are open and internships are available. Discover more about the program at www.baltimore21stcenturyschools.org.
Building a brighter future together.
A lot of exciting things are happening each and every day in Baltimore City Public Schools. Our students are learning, excelling, growing, and achieving as they prepare for college and careers. You can see our students in action and the work they're producing right here on Education Channel 77 and online. If you'd like to watch more stories on the exciting things our students are doing in Baltimore City Public Schools, please visit www.vimeo.com/cityschools. Did you know that students who have a regular diet of nutritious foods are healthier, have more energy, and do better in school? That's why City Schools is increasing its healthy and fresh food options for every meal served during the school day.
They have my favorite vegetables and fruits. By eating healthy, I'm gonna get more smart. If you don't be healthy, you're gonna get sick.
Students who eat well, do well. So be sure to choose healthy options to keep your body energized and your mind focused and ready to learn.
You're watching Education Channel 77.
Welcome back to Baltimore Pioneers. I'm Jacqueline Hammond here with Jennifer Esvey, co-director of the A&T and Robert M. Best Center on Innovation and Placemaking at Brookings Institution. So in recent years, there's been a rise of gentrification around our city, which has threatened diversity in neighborhoods and has segregated many parts of Baltimore. So let's talk about your efforts there. How do innovation districts tie into that?
Sure. Well, the first thing I'll say is that, the impact that innovation districts can have is really around job growth and business growth, and they sort of go hand in hand. So when we talk about, widespread economic opportunity, it really starts with growth and job growth. And I think that's what you're seeing, whether in this city or where you're seeing innovation, these innovation hubs or districts grow up in other places, around the country. That's really the key part of their impact, because these areas, as they grow and as they develop, they're creating not only jobs, but they tend to be high quality jobs in a variety of sectors, depending on whether it's life sciences or engineering or the tech community. These tend to be good jobs, and they also tend to be good jobs with a large spin-off effect, so that they create a lot of other jobs, whether they're in legal or accounting or retail, restaurants, throughout the economy. And so they're important job centers for their communities. But the important thing is asking the question of, well, how do we ensure that as these job centers grow, that they benefit the city as a whole and benefit both the communities that are surrounding them and the residents throughout the community. So in some ways, I'd almost flip the gentrification question around, because in many communities, it's not so much gentrification that's yet the major challenge. The major challenge is you're seeing a lot of these growth, whether it's in innovation districts or other type of economic centers, but it's not necessarily redounding to the benefit of their surrounding communities or to the whole population of the city. So what's really important with these innovation districts is, one, to really help continue that growth and recognize it, for the impact that it has, but really importantly say, well, how can we be sure through education and workforce training and business development and neighborhood improvements, how can we be sure that growth really benefits more people in the community?
And to jump back, I know our Innovation Village was started back in 2015 after the riots. What was the hopes how would an innovation district help that area at that time?
Sure. And I had a great opportunity to sit down and talk with Richard May just a few months ago, actually, and got a little bit of a better sense, straight from him on, I think, what the vision was. So I'll try to, paraphrase that, I guess, the best that I can, or to my understanding. And I think really the vision for the village was to say, look, there's a lot of assets. As I noted before, there's a lot of university assets in this area. You've got transit hubs, you've got existing businesses. It's really well located within the city. So how do you take those assets and really build on them and really engage the community, particularly around business growth and entrepreneurship? And how do you speak to the community and understand what their vision is for their own place? And how do you start making those investments to both help redevelop the area, but also ensure that the people in this area have the opportunity to to be business owners, to be entrepreneurs, and to really be part of the growth and not just sitting on the sidelines.
And is there any negative impact that can come from innovation districts? Like, is there a way that anyone could misuse this uprising and this hub?
Sure. I think, at this point, it might be too early to say what the negative impacts necessarily are. I think there are a few things that we need to watch out for, though. One, I think coming back to this issue of who benefits from innovation districts, it'll be really important to ensure that as these districts grow, that they're not growing up as isolated enclaves, but rather that they're growing up and that the surrounding communities are part of that growth. And again, not just sitting on the fringes of it, that the community is really engaged in that growth, that the community has access to the jobs that are growing there, that they have access to the business development opportunities. And I don't think that's going to happen by accident. The growth is really important, but I think what we see in a lot of growth areas is that the benefits don't automatically just trickle down. And I think that's where the leadership in these areas and the community, they really need to be intentional about ensuring that people are able to connect up to the growth that's happening. And I think if that doesn't happen, that will be a major loss opportunity in these areas. I think the other thing that sometimes that we see is the chance for people to just start using the innovation district title and kind of slapping it on, different types of development. And when they're not really building on the assets, they're just using it as a title that doesn't have a lot of meaning behind it. And I think we've seen that in places as well.
Let's take our last break for this episode. And when Baltimore Pioneers returns, Ms. Vey and I will discuss the future of innovation districts. We'll be right back.
Modernizing school buildings for Baltimore City students has begun, like right here at Arundel Elementary School.
Amazing new spaces to learn in.
Yes, through this program, schools and communities are being brought together in a brand new way.
And I'm so proud to be part of this effort.
That's right. Construction jobs are open and internships are available. Discover more about the program at www.baltimore21stcenturyschools.org.
Building a brighter future together.
A lot of exciting things are happening each and every day in Baltimore City Public Schools. Our students are learning, excelling, growing, and achieving as they prepare for college and careers. You can see our students in action and the work they're producing right here on Education Channel 77 and online. If you'd like to watch more stories on the exciting things our students are doing in Baltimore City Public Schools, please visit www. Did you know that students who have a regular diet of nutritious foods are healthier, have more energy, and do better in school? That's why City Schools is increasing its healthy and fresh food options for every meal served during the school day.
I love that they have my favorite vegetables and fruits. By eating healthy, I'm gonna get more smart. If you don't be healthy, you're gonna get sick.
Students who eat well, do well. So be sure to choose healthy options to keep your body energized and your mind focused and ready to learn. Vimeo.com/cityschools.
Thanks for watching Education Channel 77.
Welcome back to Baltimore Pioneers. I'm Jacqueline Hammond here with Jennifer S. Vey, and we are discussing innovation districts and their potential effect in Baltimore. So are there any other spots in the city that could become innovation districts other than, like, of course, the Port Covington area?
Well, I think the one thing is, as I pointed out, there's several other areas where you're seeing this emerging ecosystem. We've got around the University of Maryland in Baltimore and the Biopark. You've got around the Hopkins complex. You've got Station North, potentially Port Covington, certainly Innovation Village, and then even some areas out further, outside the city as well. But I think what's one critical thing with innovation districts is for any given city, they can only support so many, these enclaves. That's not to say that there aren't other centers of economic activity throughout a city or a metro area, but in terms of innovation districts, most cities, except for your very largest cities, probably can really only grow a small number just by virtue of the kind of activities that happen there. So, I think what will be interesting to see is how these particular areas continue to grow and develop over time.
So I know like a lot of these areas like on the verge, but what's holding them back from really being like innovation districts?
Sure, that's a great question, and I think whether it's here or whether it's in other cities around the country, I think it's a few things. I mean, one, you really have to have that starting strength of assets to really build on, and that's really where it begins. And then I think as these places grow and develop, what could be holding them back is when the stakeholders there, the different actors there, aren't able to sort of coalesce around a common kind of set of goals. So you may continue to just have kind of natural market-oriented growth, but I think until a lot of these actors sort of recognize where there are places where they could be working together in ways that really help fuel growth, until that happens, many of these places will probably be held back somewhat.
And will we see a continued growth in these districts? I know we have a few major ones that are almost there, but are you seeing like a trickling out of like the city? Is this going to become a thing in this thing?
Well, I think when we look at the patterns around the country, I think what we've really been seeing and what's really driving all this is just that this, what we call it the spatial geography, the geography of innovative economic growth is just shifting. And I don't expect that we're going to see those patterns change, again, because it really is being driven by forces like the more collaborative nature of innovation and the preferences of workers. So, for example, if you think about where the innovation economy was growing, back in the mid part of the 20th century, a lot of that economy was growing, far out in the suburbs. It reflected the patterns of growth that we were seeing in terms of where jobs were moving, where people were moving. And so too was the innovation economy. So it was growing up in very suburban-oriented science parks or around highway corridors. But because of the changes in the innovation economy itself and that need for greater collaboration and the different desires of workers, that's what's really making that geography switch. And I think, if while we don't have a crystal ball, I think that those patterns aren't going to change anytime soon, and we're going to continue to see that kind of growth and development, both in this city, but in places around the globe. So it started, largely in Europe and in the U.S., but we're really seeing these enclaves of innovation grow in cities around the globe.
And what will this start doing for our economy, this enclave of like innovation, especially on low income parts of Baltimore?
Well, I think that's going to be the big question. I mean, the patterns are happening. Certainly the innovation economy itself is ubiquitous. Innovation is everywhere, right? It's in everything that we do, and it's certainly, you can look over the changes and see how technology is really altering how we live and how we work and how we play. And so the economy in all sectors is increasingly built on innovation and technology. And whether it's in healthcare or whether it's in the retail sector or whether it's in engineering, and that's not going to change. And so what's important is that cities recognize what their major strengths are in terms of the innovation economy, how the patterns of where that economy is located are shifting and changing, and then how they can better support that, and then importantly, how they can be really aggressive about building the kind of workforce that's prepared for these jobs, and really finding ways to better connect them to these jobs, and really, ensuring that as these places grow and develop and there's a lot of new opportunities, that it's the people within those cities that can really benefit from those opportunities and take advantage of them.
Well, Ms. Faye, this brings us to the end of our segment of Baltimore Pioneers. Thank you for coming on the show, and I really learned a lot. Thank you, and I can't wait to watch this grow and watch these innovation districts, grow into like their full potential, and I can't wait to be a part of it and see what I can do to help out here. Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And I'd like to thank you for watching Baltimore Pioneers, a program where we talk with thinkers and doers in Baltimore. The show is produced by an all-student crew and is brought to you by the Proximity Project, an education channel 77 of the Baltimore City Public Schools. This has been Baltimore Pioneers. I'm Jacqueline Hammett. See you next time.